people always ask me as a sommelier, like, how do you do this or that, or how should I get into wine? The one thing I always recommend is when you have friends over, is pick a varietal you like. Let's say Pinot Noir, and have every one of your friends bring a Pinot Noir from a different region from around the world. Same grape, drink so different. It's a great way to really explore those terroir differences of New Zealand to Burgundy to Russian River to Oregon, to see the same grape displayed and showed differently. And of course, the winemaker does have a large hand in it. However, at the base of that is still the Pinot Noir grape. And that's just amazing to see that full blast in a tasting that you do with your friends.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. My name is Sean Trace. I'm your host, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yes, well, good morning, Sean. Thank you for having me. I am Jeff Arnold, and I am a sommelier and the founder of Vines of Napa, the Vine Pass. It's a new passport here for Napa Valley. And basically, I am here to curate awesome experiences for people to go out there and explore the Napa Valley wine region.
That's awesome. Why, first of all, how did you get into this path? And how did you get started in the world of wine?
Well, that's a great story. It goes all the way back to 2010. I was actually working in the financial advisory field at American Express.
Wow.
And a lot of market turbulence, and I really wanted to go a different route. So I was looking around. At that time, I was in Rochester, New York, and I was looking towards the Finger Lakes wine region of central New York. And I thought, hey, as an entrepreneur, what a great time. This up and coming wine region, great, outstanding Riesling. Why not create a business that really leveraged and marketed the Finger Lakes as a whole? So I actually launched something initially it was called the Finger Lakes Wine Card.
Okay.
And I went door to door. There's about 160 wineries in the Finger Lakes, went door to door. You may see over my right shoulder there some of the Finger Lakes listed over there, like Skaneateles,
Yeah.
Cayuga, Keuka, Canandaigua. Went door to door, said, hi, I'm Jeff. I'm looking to get into this venture to help promote you as a region. And things went slowly, steadily, year after year. And that's kind of the start of me in the wine. At that point, I was not a big wine drinker, ironically. You know, those Pinot Grigio, Ecco Domani, you get some sweet wine. Was not a big wine drinker. However, I saw, a region and an area that really could benefit from some promotion.
That's awesome. Well, how then did you end up journeying into the Vines of Napa? How did that shift happen?
Yeah, so we started out 2010. Then I ended up doing wine events, culinary events, Iron Chef, cook-offs. And then around 2017, my wife and we came out to Sonoma. We actually stayed at the Hilton Round Barn in Santa Rosa for Valentine's Day. We were here for 5 days. The area just spoke to us that, that je ne sais quoi, when it's there, you know it. And we half joked, only being here for 5 days that we should move here. So 2017 kind of had that spark that lit in the background. Fast forward to 2020, we actually were going to move here right before COVID hit. We actually had a trip planned around March, and I actually had the society, the Master Somms were putting on a deductive tasting workshop in San Francisco, but COVID hits, that all got put in the background. So it's this chance Valentine's 5-day experience. They really said, hey, we love the Sonoma, love the Napa region. Why not make this our home? And here we are.
That's awesome. I love the Napa region. I grew up there, and it's just such a beautiful place, and there's so much great storytelling that goes on in the region and the different wines. And that's one of the things that people don't recognize all the time, is that one of the things that I realized growing up in that area is that each bottle is a story. There is a story to each glass that you have, and it's powerful to hear about people coming and visiting there because there is something magical about that region. And it just I love that there are people coming up and tasting and experiencing the area, Napa, Sonoma, all of that region, because it's really a special place. What makes some of the wine in that region so special, in your opinion?
Wine begins and ends with me to terroir. It's all about that place. It's all about that moment, the soil, the uniqueness of Napa with the Vaca and Maya Camas Mountains. Everyone talks about microclimates, but coming from New York, I had no idea that the temperature could vary nearly 20 degrees in only a 30-mile stretch. You
Yep.
look at the soil differences, the volcanic activity from so long ago. The soil, I've worked at estates where the soil could change from clay, to a loamy soil within a matter of feet. So, how does a vineyard over here, only 100 yards apart, produce the same exact grape, have a very different taste in the glass? And to me, that was eye opening. That really it is about everyone plants the same grapes all over the world. What's different is the atmosphere, the highs, the lows, the soil. You just can't replicate that in Napa Valley anywhere in the world.
I was talking to someone about this recently. I live in Southeast Asia, but I grew up in California, and currently, and I travel the world. My dad's from England, my mom's from the U.S. We lived all over. But one of the things that's interesting is when you see people from one place who then grow up in another. One of the things that's interesting is the Vietnamese, when they move to the US, often will get much larger, taller, and they just have different body types. And my wife was pointing this out the other day. She's like, wow, some of these guys that I met here are really big and and I said, yeah, when you give people a different diet, you give them different things, you get different water, you get different nutrients, they grow up with different food in schools. Like, people grow in a different way. And I was pointing that out to someone when they were asking about, well, is a Napa cab and a Bordeaux cab the same thing? And I was like, well, major differences because they're grown in different places. Certainly, they come from the same type of grape, but it's very different when you people as well. You grow someone up and have someone grow up in a different place. Things change.
100%. And one of my people always ask me as a sommelier, like, how do you do this or that, or how should I get into wine? The one thing I always recommend is when you have friends over, is pick a varietal you like. Let's say Pinot Noir, and have
Yeah,
every one of your friends bring a Pinot Noir from a different region from around the world.
nice.
Same grape, drink so different. It's a great way to really explore those terroir differences of New Zealand to Burgundy to Russian River to Oregon, to see the same grape displayed and showed differently. And of course, a winemaker does have a large hand in it. However, at the base of that is still the Pinot Noir grape. And that's just amazing to see that full blast in a tasting that you do with your friends.
I love that. Well, you're touching on something too, because one of the questions I'm talking about and talking to people about is like a lot of people are drinking other things, these days. But why does wine still matter in today's world?
To me, wine matters because it's all about community. It's all about memories. It's all about that experience you have, whether it be around the dinner table, whether it be over a charcuterie board. Wine is really, to me, is life. It's about the
Yes,
memories. It's about bringing, like I said, bringing families, bringing people together. When you go here or there, you may not remember all the details, but you remember who you're with. You remember where you were. Then you remember that feeling. How did it make you feel? And to me, wine makes people feel together, makes them feel community.
I love that. Yeah, it's interesting because when you open up a beer, most of the time the beers that I opened with friends, I didn't share the beer with them. It's not like, hey,
Yeah,
let's open one beer and pour it into two. No, it's like you open up a beer and you drink the beer. But with a bottle of wine, I mean, certainly some people will polish one off by themselves, but most of
sure.
the time you're opening up the bottle and you're sharing it with friends. You're sharing it to people around you, and it's a community experience.
And I think, Sean, people like you and I also, if you don't work in the industry, you don't really understand what it goes into making that bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Prior to coming here in New York, I did not work at a winery. even as a great knowledge of wine prior to coming to California, until you work at a wine, or until you're in the region, and see all of the love, all of the care, all those steps that go into making that bottle of wine, it makes you appreciate it more. Whereas I kind of joked that, you can make a distilled spirit, you can make beer, in your garage, anywhere in the world. Most of these brewers are not actually farming their product. They're not putting
Yeah.
their hands in the dirt or the soil. And to me, that's also what makes it different, is that you really understand what goes into making this product. And it's a kind of a living, moving, breathing product. You can, buy a bottle of wine, save it for 10 years, put it down. It's going to taste dramatically different. Whereas your Heineken, your Tito's is going to taste the same day after day.
Yeah. One of the things I love that you point that out. People do not realize that wine is farmed. It is really a thing that the winemakers are out there in the fields. I mean, when I first moved to Napa in my teens, I remember driving through the valley, and one of the things that always struck me, I was like, "What is that?" Were these giant turbo fans? Look like like this like airplane propeller that just
Yeah.
sits out in the middle of the fields. And people, when they see that, I was like, "What is that?" They don't understand that, like, if it starts getting too cold and there's a frost, they turn these things on. I remember the first time I heard those things turned on, I was living in St. Helena. It terrified me in the middle of the night. It was, this loud like drone, and I was just like, "What is that?" But I went out and I saw people. They were out there working. They were out there checking the grapes. They were out there middle of the night. A bunch of people out there making sure things didn't get too cold. And that's just one example, but there are all types. People are constantly in the fields. They are constantly out there working with these plants to check, to see how they're going. Nature does a lot, but the rest is people. It's a lot of people out there putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this product.
And the one thing I love to educate guests on when I worked at a tasting room is that when you think about it, everything out there can be a detriment to the grapes. Too
Yep.
much sun isn't good. Too much heat isn't good. Too many animals, too much moisture, too much humidity, the mold, the rot, the mildew in the air. Basically, everything out there can benefit or detract, and you can't control any of it. And it's an amazing product. And if you said, in an MBA class, hey, we're going to make this business where you can't control the product, you can't control the environment, you can't control what they want, you can't control pricing, you can't control demand, why would you get into that industry? And it's all about passion. I mean, the people that are in the wine industry, the owners, it's all about legacy. It's about creating something that brings people together.
I remember I was at my brother's house, and his neighbor was a winemaker, and he had just finished a special run, and it was like it was a small run of wine, and he had about, I think, 50 bottles of this one that he had just made. And he ran over to my brother's house, and he's like, "I've got a bottle." He's like, "We're gonna drink this right now." And he popped it open, and it was amazing. And to see his face, and the just the passion, the joy, and this, like, I made this, like, this is something. And it was phenomenal. It was one of the best wines I've ever had. And I think that, there was soul to it. And this is something that a lot of the guests keep coming back to. In a world where you can get carbon copy items from everywhere. You think about that. Like, beer. I'm not hating on beer, and there are some fine beer makers out there. But like you said, I open a can of beer from any given company and I open a second can, I expect them to taste exactly the same.
The same, yeah.
And most people do. And if there's something that doesn't taste the same, that company is going to be having issues with whoever's producing their quality, or the quality check people. But the reality is, with wine, every glass is different,
And not only is it different, but what you're eating will also obviously transform that wine as well. So your food obviously makes that bottle exactly different every single time.
Yeah. Well, what makes a truly great wine beyond just like technical quality? What makes a great wine? Or is it
Well,
completely unique?
yeah, and that's for each of us to decide. I mean, what
Right.
I look for in a wine is different than you look for in a wine. I always talk about depth with clients, and people always ask, well, what is depth? It's kind of that term you throw around, but what does it mean? I always like to use the analogy of like a filing cabinet. The deeper the cabinet is, the more depth
Mm.
it has. So every time you smell something different, see something different, you interpret the legs. All of these things are a file in that filing cabinet, and the more depth the wine has, to me, that's a sign of a quality wine, a wine for aging. It's a wine that has, more characteristics, more body, and those are terms that everyone just throws around. My favorite catch term now is, it's lively. What does lively really mean? Everyone likes to throw out these nuance. This wine is nuanced. Well, what does that really mean? And no one really knows. It's your definition, my definition. But I look for depth. I look for things in the wine that every time you take a sip or swirl, something new comes to your mind and to your palate.
I like that. And I do like how you point out these catchwords too, because I love that. And there's a lot of the areas in our lives that we get a lot of that. But one of the things too is the other day I went to a restaurant in here in Vietnam. There's a phenomenal, spreading across Southeast Asia, phenomenal pizza place, operated by these guys from Japan. You would know, man. Some Japanese guys who came to Vietnam, made their own cheese, and created a phenomenal pizza brand. And I'm not actually going to talk about the pizza right now. When I was in there, they had a sparkling soda that they were giving out. But the sparkling soda, I like soda water, but the sparkling soda was made with passion fruit. And one of the things, when I took a sip, and it was just a thing of fresh passion fruit that they poured in there right at the table. And one of the things too is I took a sip of that, and I was just like, I was not expecting to get hit by flavors. But it was like I got smacked in the face with all of these layers of flavors. And I was expecting something very shallow. But when I drank that, it was exceptionally deep. And so I understand what you're saying. It's like there is just this range that you weren't expecting, or you were expecting and it proved you're
Yeah.
right, you know?
Could not agree more. 100%. It's a great way to explain it too. With a untraditional product, you would not expect depth to come from. So yes.
Right? Now, what in your mind, one of the things too, like we were talking earlier about like the place that a grape is grown. But can you talk to me about like how different vineyards and place and storytelling shape your approach to wine?
Well, having been in Napa for not quite 5 years now, I've worked at three different vineyards, and you get different approaches to the time and place. Storytelling is really all about bringing people, whether it be your friends, your family, your guests, into like kind of we're talking about that passion, that love, that desire. And when you work at different places, you get to understand really the fullness of everything that goes into that product. I had the opportunity to work at the oldest winery in Napa, Charles Krug Winery. I mean, obviously that was the starting point for Napa wine. And when you go into a place like Oakville Grocers, you pick up more storytelling, you see the history of each AVA, and really what Mr. Krug, George Yount, what all these people meant to it. And you look at it today, the storytelling to me just brings the wine alive. And it's just a way for people to determine, and having a breadth of different places to work at. I just love everything you learn. Every day you learn something new about Napa Valley. You learn something about the terroir, which way the vineyard is laid out, clones, rootstock. There's so many things that go into it. And the thing is when you're with a guest, when you're talking about wine, make it relevant to what Sean likes. That's a difficult part because people don't want to
Yeah.
hear about phenolic bitterness. They don't want to hear about pH, how many months of oak. And that's the one thing I think that we're kind of getting wrong in the industry
Yeah.
is today's Gen Z, they want to enjoy it together with people. They want to come together. They don't necessarily want to hear how many months of oak were on the wine, what percent
Yeah.
malolactic fermentation. You get too much into it, you kind of lose people. And that's, I think, what we're challenged with a little bit right now in the industries. We're so used to being such a storyteller. Now we got to kind of bring it back a little bit, unwind it, and less is more kind of an approach.
And less is more, and also experiential. Like I really think that like someone was asking me what makes a great wine, and I was like, I honestly have no idea, but I know when I've tasted it, and they're like, well, what does that mean? I was like, well, I've tried a bunch of different bottles of wine, and I know it now when I taste it. Like and I can't explain it to you, but I know what a bad wine tastes like to me, and I'm sure it's subjective, but I also know what a great wine tastes like because I've had the chance to have a lot of glasses. And I think that
Yes.
that's one of the things that I think that I emphasize for friends when they ask me about wine and how to find a great wine. And I'm just like, get out and taste stuff, man. Get out and try different things and discover what you like. And also maybe figure out and find out that what you like changes over time. And that's okay too.
100%. And it's like once you've had 300 hamburgers, you kind of know which one's good, which one isn't good.
Right?
Same thing is true with wine. But I also come back to it's all about time and place. And sometimes you don't want that great bottle of wine because you're going to mix it with some ice and make a frosé out of it, or maybe you're
Right?
going to make a mimosa out of it. So also knowing when to. And my family likes to joke around that I have 3 different storages of wine.
Mm,
Behind me, I have my everyday wine. That's the bottle you can just pick up weekday. It's not too expensive, not too cheap, kind of just right for any moment. Then I've got in my closet, I've got my storage wine. And that's the wine that
mm.
you have to have permission to get in there because that's the weekend wine. You're having a great steak.
Yep.
You want a great, big, bold Cabernet. And then I've got my other closet with my tomorrow wine. And that's the wine that's too young right now for me to drink.
Mm.
And I always get picked on because it is about, sometimes you do want to not have a big bottle of wine. You don't want to have that depth. You just want something light, easy. It's a summertime. You're having charcuterie. I want
Yeah.
something a little bit different than my weekend wine when I'm at a special occasion. So I like to think about wine that way too. Sometimes I want to break from thinking about the wine. Just have it to drink it and just enjoy it.
I love that because it's like one of the things too is I um I think that one of the things that I absolutely love about the Napa Valley is not just the wine, but the restaurants. And I think that when people come up there and, and there are some beautiful, amazing, fancy places, but there's also some places that are just mom and pop shops that have phenomenal food. Like I think probably the greatest sandwich I've ever had, at least in Napa, is the Junie's sandwich up in St. Helena. And,
Yeah, the
I
Junie
remember
juice.
Junie's juice, man. Junie juice is amazing. And we would roll in there and grab one of those and go home and figure out what we could pair our Junie sandwich with, what wine worked there. And it was like like you're saying, an everyday type of wine worked great. But the cool thing is that, there's always something for everyone, and you just have to figure out what
Sure.
that is for you. Now, how do you approach building community around wine? Like, what do you think we can do to start building more bridges in this to the younger generation and to newer wine drinkers?
To me, that's around the catchword approachable.
I love that.
And that's really, when I use the term approachable, it could be one, it could be cost. It could be not making wine so fancy. Everyone wants to talk about, I always pick on all these paragraphs you see for the wine descriptions when you go to a winery. I'm like, did some SAT writer make up this paragraph? The morning dew of the lime zest of the whatever. They're using all these big words. I think we've kind of gotten a little bit away in the wine industry, away from our roots, not to use a pun there. But we need to make it approachable. So,
Yeah.
you're not feeling like you're intimidated that I don't know enough or I'm not fancy or which way do I swirl the glass? Do I smell it here? Do I smell it here? It's just making wine once again all about the experience, and how you experience it is different than your neighbor, different from your family, and that's okay. It's okay to experience wine how you want on your terms, and not to you look at the movie, Wine Country. They're throwing shade at the wineries, how fancy
Yeah.
make it approachable. This is not meant to be. And what you're talking about with Junie is wine does not have to be expensive. It does not have to come from a
No.
fancy chalet to be awesome. I think we've kind of gotten a little bit you know, ahead of ourselves, maybe a little bit more about it's about the building, about the grandeur. It's about the
Yeah.
pricing. It's about how many, how many glasses you have. We need to get back to basics, get back to making wine about what it is. It's a grape. And people always laugh when I say it's grape juice. That's really what we're drinking. What we're passionate about is literally adult grape juice. And remember that. Go to Europe, go to Spain, go to Tuscany, see how they're doing it. They're not, kind of in that, bigger grandeur movement. I think that's what we kind of got into here. We got to get out of our own way and just make people want to come in and have that community moment with us.
I two funny stories. I remember I was at a tasting room and I was with some friends, and the person that was doing the tasting was like, there are hints of tobacco. And my friend turned to me and whispered, he was like, "Dude, I don't smoke." I was like, "No, there's not. It's flavors." And he's like, "Well, why is he saying there's tobacco in this?" And I was like, it's the way he's describing the aromas and the tastes, and he's like, and he was just blown away. And he's like, "I still don't get the whole tobacco thing." And I was cracking up because, and then he was reading these other descriptions. He's like, "Are
Yeah.
all these things in here? Is this all in the wine?" I was like, "No, it's just the flavors." And he was like, and I pulled him aside and I was like, "Just try this and tell me after you taste it, are there any things that it reminds you of?" And he's like, "All right." He took it and he's like, "Yeah, man, I don't know. It reminds me of my mom's watermelon." I was like, "All right, that's a weird, yeah, that's a weird, thing, but man, that's what you're getting from it." He's like, "Oh, so that's what you're talking about." And and then I remember once he was like, there was this thing in Vietnam about there was this whole thing a couple years ago about people, and it was like on US social media as well, like people arguing the correct way to hold the glass, to do this, and the correct type of glass for the correct type of wine. And then I remember saw this one guy, and he posted his video. He was pouring his wine into a mug, and he's like, "The right way for me to drink my wine is whatever I've got in front of me." And he's like, "But bottoms up." And what I was struck by that, because it was like, just get out and try it. Like, certainly there are great ways, better glass to drink it from. And maybe it's going to, get more oxygen into the wine. But at the end of the day, are you able to just enjoy your glass? Or are you allowing different levels of pretense and levels of restriction, like, and preventing you, like you said, from having access to a great experience?
Could not agree more. And it's always funny because everyone see that I'm a certified sommelier. Everywhere I go, people are trying to test you. And what angle is your glass at? How long do you let it open up before you drink it? What temperature? You know what? Just drink the wine, enjoy it. Your experience is your experience. And I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I'm just here to help you create passion for the wine, passion for the product. So you tell your friends you drink more and you really appreciate what goes into that bottle, not how you actually go about tasting it.
I love that. Well, what advice would you give for people who want to get into wine but don't know where to start?
To me, it's real simple. It's just drinking the wine. And the one thing that's kind of the dorky side of it is you have to drink it, but you also have to take little meticulous notes, whether it's, in your brain, whether it's in a book. You really have to figure out what do legs really tell you. What does the color of the wine tell you with white wine? It's looking at the little things and just making little notes of it. And it blows me away when you sit down in a tasting with a master somm and how he or she can remember where they were, in the Côte d'Aron, drinking this fabulous wine, and that's the smell I remember from that one vineyard that one time. So you have to start to assemble this brain and this network of memories so you can know what the wine is telling you. it's just drink wine, drink what you like. Usually people start with the sweeter, the white wine, wherever your journey starts. When I met my wife, she was drinking this sweet red, I'll call it Kool-Aid juice. And now we're at a winery last weekend and she's getting all, the oak, Howell Mountain, East Bank, West Bank, vineyard facing. She started to talk about this. She's like, I really have become bougie now, because as you drink more, like you're saying, just drink it, pay little attention to it, little nuances, and I think that will start to open your eyes up. That once again, that Pinot Noir concept of having Pinot from 10 different worldly regions, that will start to bring into play the terroir and also what the winemaker brings to play. But just drink, enjoy, and just see where that journey takes you.
I love that. One of the things that I think that I love about wine, and I think about learning for people to learn about wine, it's to be able to dive into things that beyond a surface level. We all listen to music, but I took this one great class from Berklee College of Music about music production and how what a perfect mix sounds like. And they played some Steely Dan, and they played this one track that was like, studied to be the perfect mix. And I was listening to this, and I was like, I just hear music. But then when my professor said, just sit down and start taking notes, start writing down what you might hear. And I was like, well,
Sure.
I'm hearing like a drums over from this side, but there's less of that sound from this side. He's like, all right, that's one thing. He said, now you just recognize that sometimes things don't play equally in a really good mix. Sometimes there's something that's coming from one side more than the other. I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was a thing. He's like, yeah. But as you start paying attention and opening up to things, you start to see it. There was a couple years ago, I read this story about the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. And he had these people come to his pagoda, and he gave them a piece of fruit. And he's like, here, eat this. And they wanted to talk to him and ask him all these questions. And he's like, stop talking and just enjoy the fruit. Like, you have it in front of you. One of the things that I think that is powerful for me about wine is we run through our lives constantly at full speed. But when you're able to sit down with a glass and you start with the smell, you start with the sensory, like all of the senses, and just try to like really bring it in. It's one of the few times in my day and in my week and my month that I'm able to slow down and really pay attention.
Yeah. There's a great book that your Steely Dan just brought up to me, is A Message in a Bottle
Oh,
by
yeah.
Master Som Tim Geyser. And it's really talking about the deductive tasting method that Psalms use to really, I hate to use it, to really determine what a wine's telling you. And
Mm,
it's written at a very novice level. Sometimes some of these wine filing other books can be half right, half wrong, but this book is spot on. And it's all about when you smell, taste, and see. Is it from the grape? Is it from the winemaker? Is it from the terroir? Those are the
mm,
three things you're really trying to look at. And to me, you kind of hit a point there as I look at wine tasting to me, and I'm very, go, go, go. It's really a way for me to slow down, like you're mentioning. And it's almost like you're meditating because you're thinking about
yeah.
nothing more than what's in that glass. And it's a
Yes.
way for me to just drown out everything else out, really get into that bowl. And people kind of look at me sometimes weird and squirrely, just enjoy the wine. Well, I'm really trying just to focus on this, and just everything else is drowned out. And it's a meditation form for me, really.
I am having one of my friends come back on the winery in a couple days, on this podcast in a couple days, and we're going to talk about the holidays and the perfect wine for each challenging moment that you might encounter during the holiday season. And it's kind of tongue in cheek, but the reality is it's just about coming back to the present moment. And it's like we all have stuff going on around us, but if you can kind of just center and find that little space of zen within inside yourself to just, there's a lot of wisdom that can be found in there.
Sure.
That great quote, in vino veritas, in wine truth.
You brought up a point I thought about with the pairing, and people always ask at the winery, like, what's the perfect pairing? That comes back to the approachability. Is
Yeah,
drink what you want with what you want. I mean, you can
I love that.
use axioms like what grows together goes together,
Mm,
acid with French and butter, butter with, Chardonnay. But you know what? Try whatever. Sometimes you get a unique approach to a wine. Like I've had Sauvignon Blanc with a steak. I mean, you're going to throw a little chimichurri sauce, maybe some green sides like a broccoli, Brussels sprouts. There really is no bad pairing. And I think people put too much emphasis on you got to have the right
sure.
bottle for the right meal. And that comes back to making wine approachable, not making people feel like, oh, I don't know enough. Drink what you like with what you want to eat.
I I, I worked in some restaurants in the valley, and one of the things is there was a restaurant that was on Main Street in St. Helena. These two brothers ran it. Um, Andy and something Bergman, the Bergmans. It was a Bergmans. It was a long time ago in the late 90s, early 2000s. The restaurant didn't last forever. Those guys were a hoot, but man, they had some good food. And they were two of the most unpretentious guys you'd ever meet. They were approachable, they were cool. And when I went in there and we were talking about wine pairings and things like that, and one of the things that I remember Brian told me is like just find a wine you like, and if you like it, tell someone else that maybe they'll like it. And I was like, well, what's the perfect pairing? He's like, man, try anything. Try anything. Like sell them on it, like in whatever way you want. Just put it out there and let them experience it. And if they're ordering some broccoli and they want to try this wine, let them try it. See, maybe it's a fail, maybe it's a win, but they're
Yeah.
not going to know if they don't try. And that's your job, is not to judge them. It's to tell them these are what we've got, to help them understand what those wines maybe kind of taste like, and then let them decide and see and play with colors. It's like, I remember my daughter's art teacher came in, and she was working with my daughter on a painting. She gave her a bunch of different paints, and she's like, we're going to paint a house. This color is going to make that house feel warm. This color here is going to make the house feel a little cool. This color makes it a little mysterious. She described all the colors and what they can kind of do, but then she's like, now what do you want to paint? And my daughter's like,
Yeah.
oh, I get to pick. And that's the beauty. Like, go out and let people experience things.
And another thing just came to my mind when you're talking there is that you always have to pair a bottle with your palate. And you'll go to a
Ooh,
restaurant, and some are always, they have in the back of their mind, they're trying to get you into the perfect bottle. My favorite's the vintage. Like, oh, you got to get the
yeah,
2003 vintage. It was a wet year, a dry year, it was overly hot. But if you're trying to push someone into a Cabernet or a Bordeaux from steak, and if they don't like the essence of a smoky, gamey Bordeaux wine, they're not gonna like it, even though it's maybe on quote on paper the perfect pairing. If their palate says maybe
mm,
Pinot, you wouldn't necessarily go all the way over here. So I think sometimes, especially in the industry, we get so hung up on the perfect this, the perfect that, perfect this or that. What do you like to drink, Sean?
yeah.
And then that's the thing is you got to make Sean's palate flow with the bottle with the meal.
You see, that's it. Like my favorite wines are not other people's favorite wines. I love Merlot, I love Pinot, and I love Malbec, and that's what I like. And they're not the big heavy tannin wines. I enjoy Cab, but that's not my first line. And it's just like. And for a long time, I felt, and this is this funny thing, as a wine drinker living in Napa, I felt embarrassed by that because, like you said, everyone was like, this is the perfect wine over here. And I was like, well, that's not what my palate enjoys. And I
Correct.
finally came to the point of just like a couple of years ago realizing, you know what? My palate's not like other people's palates, and that's okay.
And it's one of those things now I think that there's a challenge, and I think the wine industry is suffering a little bit because of the wine list at restaurants. If you
Mm,
look at the by the glass, if you look at the selections, now of course your top, Michelin restaurants have fantastic wine lists from top to bottom, but most of America's wine lists are going to maybe not be representative of a good bottle of Sauv Blanc or good bottle of Cabernet.
Yeah.
So I almost always bring my own bottle with me. Even though I used to think about why would I pay $25 or $35 as a corkage fee? Why would I pay you to open my bottle up? But now I think about it. Why do I want to drink a 2022 Malbec that's brand new and young? I'd
Yeah.
rather bring what I like and enjoy, not knowing if their wine list will mesh with my palate. So I always recommend to guests, don't be afraid to bring a bottle of your own wine to dinner. Pay the corkers, drink what you like versus having to pick a bottle off of their list, which may not mesh with your palate.
I love that. Well, what is your favorite varietal, and what do you think? And these are kind of separate. What do you think
Yeah.
people should be drinking more of right now?
But if you ask any some, well, what am I going to have for food? What is the moment? What is
Yeah.
the environment? But coming from the Finger Lakes, getting back to my roots, there's a couple of varietals. Riesling, you kind of drink Riesling in the Finger Lakes. There's wineries that have 12 different reasons on their menu.
Wow.
Getting back to that terroir, the sugar level, really the winemaking style from, your ice wine all the way down to your bone dry wine. I love Riesling because it's one of the varietals that really does take on that characteristic of terroir.
I
It's kind
see.
of like we were talking about your friend, and I talk about what do you taste or smell. To me, it's all about the power of inclusion. You think it's there, therefore it's there. Do I
Yeah.
really get the stone fruit to really get the pear, the tropical fruit, the star fruit? Maybe, maybe not. But once you say it's there, it's there. Reason's also so versatile. I call it like the Swiss Army knife of wine. Whether it's going to be some of the spicy food, maybe over in the Southeast Asia area, throw a little bit of a
Hmm.
sweeter Riesling with it to bring that temperature down of the spice. I love a good bottle of Riesling. Um, I really enjoy white wine more because you can't hide behind the oak.
Hmm.
You really have to focus on the grape. You have to focus on the winemaking. So I really gravitate a lot more towards minimalistic winemaking. Less is more, less oak, less alcohol. Riesling on the white side. On the red side, I'm going to come back Pinot Noir. Same thing. Winemakers, they hate the grape, but they love it because it's such a challenging grape. And Pinot Noir, once again, just like Riesling, will take on that characteristic of a high altitude Pinot Noir to a
Yeah.
valley floor Pinot. Whether it's going to be near the coast on here, whether you're going to Central Otago, in New Zealand, an up and coming wine region. Pinot is so maneuverable. I talk about maneuverable. You look at your Cabernet, such a big, heavy grape. Not a lot of maneuverability, maybe in a Cabernet that a Pinot Noir can be done with the winemaker's finger. So I love those two grapes, and they're very, very food friendly. From a Pinot Noir, from a steak down to a ham, your Riesling from spicy, to buttery. It goes with a lot of different foods, and you bring them to a party, almost no one's going to say, I don't want to drink a Riesling or Pinot Noir. They're
Right.
also very, very approachable by a wide palette of people.
I love that. Well, what are you working on right now? What are some projects that you said that you had something that you were working on and want to share a little bit more about? Tell me about that.
Yeah, what I'm working on now is this concept of the Vine Pass. Having been in Napa now for 5 years and having going back to my roots in the Finger Lakes wine travel card I developed, and I grew that for 12 years. It went from the Finger Lakes destination card to the wine travel card because I include different regions in it, from the Niagara to the Lake Erie escarpment. And when I came to Napa, I sold that brand, had no intention of launching something similar here in Napa. But looking at the headwinds,
Mm.
looking at what's going on in Napa, I really wanted to develop something that focused on those boutique wineries. We're talking a little bit about that, the size, the grandeur, trying to really focus on it in today's environment. It's difficult. You got 450 wineries here in Napa, another 450 in Sonoma. How do people that are coming into town, how do they find those real hidden gems? Like you're talking about, the restaurant, whether it be Junie's, the Bergman's there in St. Helena. How can I help people find those authentic charm? What was Napa 20 years ago that's still there? How do you find those places? And that's why I went door to door and started this concept called the Vine Pass. It's
Yeah.
really a curated list of wines that I've really tasted. They have great wine, great experiences, and you really know you're going to have that seal of approval when you go there. And also, the wines are approachable. Their tastings are not going to be triple digits. Their bottles of wine are not $250 a bottle. So it's a place that everyone can kind of come to and know you're going to have a great experience and not have to worry about being overly worried about what you do or don't know and how fancy or how 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 the wine interprets, if that makes sense.
Totally does. Where can people find out more about you or look up anything related to what you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's just simply vinesofnapa.com is our URL. That's my brand name. Down the road, I'm hoping to launch something like a wine bar. So the Vines of Napa is my brand and my product is the Vine Pass. Google Vine Pass, look up vinesofnapa.com. I've got great wineries from Sainsbury and Hyde down there in Carneros, great Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Chase Cellars has a 123-year-old vine Zinfandel, truly old vine Zin. I've got some mountain locations such as Sherwin and Schweiger up in Spring Mountain. So I have a variety of places all over the Napa Valley region. Because when you come to Napa, you want to experience more than just one or two terroirs. I've got 10 different AVAs built within this program. So really, there's something for everyone within the program, and I really want to focus on not just Cabernet as well, because it's tough to get away from cab, and more cab.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, man, I want to thank you. Well, let me ask you this: if you could tell everyone one wine to go try today, what wine would you tell people to get out there and try?
You're talking a varietal or like a brand of
Yeah,
wine?
varietal, or what are you drinking right now?
I would say one of the having been to Tuscany a couple of times, I'm always in love with Sangiovese. The Brunello di Montalcino. I love Sangiovese because it brings me back to that moment of Tuscany. That's what Napa resembles to me, is that Tuscan kind of style, that atmosphere, that feeling. And it brings me not only back to Napa, but back to Tuscany. Sangiovese. I'm not big on this winery or that winery. I like to experience new things out there. There's, like you said, so many great wineries, and you're surprised that when you go to Costco here in Napa, you can find some great wine, whether it be at Costco, whether it be at your local winery. So just try a new bottle, seeing if it works. I think the up and comer too is Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc's always been that blending grape in America. It's always been, while it is the parent to Cabernet Sauvignon, it's always kind of been forgotten about. I think I see a lot of things going on with Cabernet Franc here in America in the next 5 or 10 years, gaining popularity, much like Sauvignon Blanc has done as well. I'm excited about Cabernet Franc, lighter body, lower alcohol levels and really lower oak levels. I think the Cabernet Franc grape is going to shine over the next 5 to 10 years.